Okay, we're up to Siman Shin Aleph, Seif Lamed Ches. Hayetzi b'Shabbos b'talis she'ena mutzuyet says Golker Chaim. If somebody goes out on Shabbos wearing a talis or tzitzis which haven't got the tzitzis connected in a halachically acceptable way, then Chaim, you are carrying on Shabbos because not for the beged but for the actual tzitzis, they're considered still important. You may use them, and although now they're not functioning as tzitzis because they have not been tied in a halachically kosher way, but you may come to detach them. You may later unravel these tzitzis and remove them from the beged, and therefore they're considered choshev for you, and therefore you're carrying tzitzis on Shabbos. But if, however, they are applied, they're attached in a halachically correct way, even though these tzitzis don't have tzecheles, the blue-ish thread that they used in times of old, muta lotzis ba b'Shabbos, even though the strings that we use nowadays generally do not have tcheles. In some circles they have been reintroduced, but generally speaking we don't wear tzitzis with tcheles nowadays. Mutzalot says, well, b'Shabbos you still are allowed to wear a talis or tzitzis in the Rishus Harabim on Shabbos. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Lamed Ches Siman Sif Kuf Membeis Kilchas Ayin El B'Siman Yud Gimel Sif Aleph Mishnah Berurah Sham Mavua Kol Protei Hadin Zeh. Okay, Kuf Mem Gimel Chayev Lo B'Shvil HaTalis. You're chayev for hitzah, not because of the talis that you're wearing, but afagav the inam mekayim. I say the tzitzis true. You're not fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis because your tzitzis are not attached halachically, in an acceptable way. Mitzad the talis you're not chayev because the talis does have a status of a malbush. The problem is you're carrying the threads, the tzitzis strings themselves. And your intention is on them, and therefore they're not bottled to the talis. Kamoi to botli haratzus legabe kila lekama b'sif lametes that we'll see in the next sifim Hashem. Even though they don't have tcheles on them, to kaimlon tcheles ein ma'akev halavon, because we paskin that the tcheles is not ma'akev, and therefore wearing the white threads, the white strings is fine, and therefore you could use them again, and therefore you're considered carrying these tzitzis. So you're not allowed to go out with a Possul talis on Shabbos or a Possul tzitzis, the beged cotton or the beged beged gadol, whether you're a big talis or just the little tzitzis under your shirt, because that is considered carrying not the talis itself or the beged itself, but the tzitzis which are Possul, because you could reuse them and they're still choshev and they're not bottled to the beged. Okay, lamates kila. What is that? Pirush urea, some sort of curtain ke'en ohel sheyesh ba retzuas that have got straps shemoischin oisa bohem that you could extend them. Mutalis atzef ba lotzeis l'shus rabim. So you've got this sort of curtain, this big material. And they've got straps hanging down from them. You're allowed to go out with that kila into a Rishus Harabim on Shabbos. Ve'ein haratzuas chashuvas kamasui, and because it's got a din of a beged, and the straps that come off it are not considered chashuv, shemuvutolos agabo, and therefore they're bottled to the beged, and therefore we ignore them, and you're allowed to go out with this kila on Shabbos. Hilkach, therefore, mutalot says berutzuas hatzluyas ba'avneit afal pi she'ein hamin alayim kashurim bohem, and therefore he says the Mechaber, you're allowed to go out with sort of straps coming off a belt, which in days of old would used to be somehow tied to the shoes, even though right now they're not tied to the shoes. They're okay. Why? The lo chashivi, they're not considered important, or botli agav ha'avneit, and therefore they're bottled to the belt that you are wearing, and therefore we can ignore them, and there's no problem of wearing the belt, there's no problems of hitzah. Aval imhem shel meshi, if however these straps are a very fine material, they're made of silk, chashivi v'le botli, they're considered chashuv, they're important, and they're not bottled, v'osa, im ein hamin alayim kashurim bohem, unless they're tied to the shoes or the long socks that you're wearing, then otherwise there'll be a problem because they're not bottled, and therefore they would be carrying. And so to anything which is detached from the beged, like loops which are torn, mutter lotzes by, v'im choshev, but if they're considered choshev, also lotzes by. Okay, so we'll come back to the torn loops in a minute. Let's just do the Mishnah Berurah. Kuf mem vav kilo. Hu ke'ein talis sheroilis atif boy. Some sort of material, some form of talis that you wrap around yourself. V'yesh v'rutzuas teluas bo. And there's some straps coming off it. V'alidei harutzuas moischin ba'oisom ba'oihel. And normally what you do is you take these straps and you attach it to some sort of oihel. V'lo yamrinan hachrutzuas lav tzorech itofu. She'ein harutzuas asuyas el lemoisa ba'oihel. V'avin masu b'shah shemisatif bo. You don't say that they're important. You say that these things in actuality are bottled to the beged, and therefore there's no problem for itzor. So in those days they would have these belts and some sort of strands would come down to tie to the shoes or to the socks. You would attach the end of these straps hanging down from the belt to the shoes, and you would stretch them up. And the top would be attached to the avnet, the belt. And sometimes you would still wear them without wearing shoes. Could go in Yom Kippurim, for example, Yom Kippur, where you can't wear shoes, or if it's very, very hot. And therefore the strands, the straps, would just be hanging down from the belt. So we ignore them. However, if they're choshev, for example, they're made of meshi, says the Mishnah Berurah Kuf Mem Ches, Hainu Haritzuas va'avnet shetole b'svaso kumi chutin mezuhavim lo shaykh klal ledin zeh v'zeh chageru v'shari t'noi chageru v'shari. So if they're meshi, then they're considered significant still, and they're not bottle, and therefore you've got a problem. However, if they're sort of decorative, they're gold straps coming down, that would be okay because it's considered a noi, it's considered the decoration for the belt, and that would be okay. Kuf mem tes im ein t'im hoyu kashurim bohem, because if they were attached, hoyu bichlal tashmish lebeged umuta b'chol gavni. So if these straps coming down from the avnet are attached to the shoes, that would be okay. And then in Kuf nun, it's talking about the loops which are torn. These loops, but im choshev, if they're considered significant or important, also lot says by. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kufnan, also lot says by. Shekivan she'ein meshameshes klum lebeged machmas shenifsak reishay. Since the loops are torn and therefore they're not considered functioning or doing anything, harihu masui. Because if they're considered choshev, then they're not serving any function. You still want them, and therefore it will be a problem to walk out with them. V'nishmas adam sham shekosav delfi ma shekosav hamachabe b'seif lametches to chutei tzitzis chashivi afagav tehin chutin ba'alma, even though they're just strings. They're choshev because you would want to use them at some future point, the tzitzis. Hu adin gabelulai. So too when it comes to the torn loops, a mosai mutalotzes bohen kashein choshev. When can you go out with a torn loop when they're not choshev? Dafka be she'ein daite lahashlim mitzad hasheni. You're not intending to fix it. V'alkein kosav t'tzorech adam lizoya. And therefore, a person should be careful. Kashenifsak le'ritzua meritzuas begadov. When a person's, let's say, his lapel, the loop at the back of his jacket or something like that, his coat, she'koshe b'shtei hatzodim mitzad echad nishar ritzua. V'chein zug krosim she'nifsak keres echad. There's a hook. Afilu she'in meshicha yichut barzel ba'alma ein choshev klal etzle haritzua v'hakeres. Mikol mokum also lot says ba'isa beged kim she'daite lahashlim l'sakin such a nifsak v'zei yishabim koimah. If your intention is to fix it, then you're going to have a problem going out with it. V'imkeinu choshev etzle ve'in a bottle of beged, and therefore it's not bottled to the beged. V'ach im ein daite lahashlim alem. But if you're not bothered by it and you're not going to fix it, oz kiven she'ein choshev bottle beged umutz lot says by. Then it's not choshev and then it's bottled to the beged. So these lapels, let's say at the back of a jacket where you hang up, on a hook or a peg, if that is torn and you're not bothered about it, then it's bottled to the beged and you can walk out on Shabbos with it, no problem. But if you are makbid or you intend to sort of stitch it up after Shabbos during the week, then it's considered choshev and therefore it's a problem on Shabbos. In Simcha Bunim Kohen Sefer, let me just quickly find it, sorry. He's got it somewhere here. Yeah, here, 114, sorry. Yeah, torn loops. There is a question regarding the status for torn belt loops and coat loops, right? So they could apply not only to your coat or your jacket, but also your belt. i.e. the loops which coats are hung from hooks. While functional, the loops are considered part of the garment to which they attached, since they service the garment. However, if the loop tears, it is no longer a functional part of the garment, and it is unclear whether one may wear the garment outdoors with the remnants of the loop attached. Most poskim hold that the loop is considered a non-valuable item and is subordinate, it's bottled to the garment, even if one plans to repair it after Shabbos. However, some poskim hold that if one plans to repair the loop, the intention is to repair it, lends importance to its remnants, and it cannot be considered subordinate to the garment. However, even according to these poskim, if one does not intend to repair the loop, it does not retain any importance and thus becomes bottled to the beged. If possible, one should follow the stringent view and not wear such a garment on Shabbos, unless he makes up his mind that he will not repair the loop. However, in the event that is not possible, one may rely upon the view of the majority of poskim, who rule that in all instances the torn loop is subordinate to the garment. So just to summarize, a torn loop on Shabbos, whether it's of on your trousers, on a belt, or more likely on the back of a jacket or a coat, if that is torn, so the first opinion is no problem, you can wear it on Shabbos because it's bottled agabe the beged. But there is a more strict view that if you that it's considered, if you intend to repair it, then you shouldn't wear it on Shabbos. One should preferably try and rely on that. But however, in the event that's not possible, you're already out and you can't just take off your jacket or whatever it may be, you can rely on the view of the majority of poskim who say that the torn loop is bottled to the garment and therefore it would be okay to wear it on Shabbos.